And we did everything I had to do on the G7. We had a good G7.
Welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, the 168th day of the year. President Trump on Air Force One as he unexpectedly cleared it from the G7 late last night after a social media post warning residents of Tehran to leave the city.
Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple.
The president telling the press corps on Air Force One that he wants a real end to the conflict.
A real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So something that would be permanent.
Yeah, or giving up entirely. That's okay, too.
Returning to the White House basically in the middle of the night, unexpectedly. There is no official White House calendar of events for today, so it's unclear what steps the president will be taking next, but he clearly wants to end Iran's nuclear program. He did say that he may send Special Envoy Steve Witkoff or even Vice President Vance to meet with Iranian officials. This is what the president said when asked about the situation during a bilateral press conference with the Canadian Prime Minister at the G7 yesterday.
Have you heard any signals or seen any messages from intermediaries that Iran wishes to de-escalate the conflict?
Yeah.
What have you heard? What have you heard from the Iranians?
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
On a quick side note, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Trump agreed on a trade deal at the G7 yesterday, and he said the agreement with Canada is making progress. More on Iran from Greg Kelly.
I'd like to bring in General Blaine, Holt, and Fred Fleitz. General Holt, retired from the Air Force, and Fred, of course, from the CIA and the Trump national security apparatus under Trump 1. Welcome, gentlemen. Fred, first to you. What do you want to say?
Well, I think President Trump has a difficult decision here. Will he use our bunker buster bombs from Diego Garcia to destroy the Fordo enrichment facility, which my friend Ella Kahanem said is deeply buried under a mountain? Trump does not want to go to war. He thinks America first means we use negotiations, we stay out of unnecessary wars, but he's making clear tonight that America first also means standing with Israel, and Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. And I believe that unless Fordo is destroyed, Iran will make a sprint towards making its first operational nuclear weapon. So I think Trump's probably going to order a bombing of Fordo with multiple bunker busters, maybe tonight.
Maybe tonight. And then again, this could be, as a friend tells me, a bit of a psyop coming home, making them think that he's about to make that order, and perhaps this gets them back to the table. The bunker buster, General Holt, that is that the mother of all bombs? Tell us a little bit about that bomb, and is the Israeli military equipped to drop it? I understand they don't have it, but if we gave them 1 or 10, could they drop it?
That's debatable on the aircraft platforms that they have. This is the GBU-57AB, or Moab, mother of all bombs. But even still, it's still it's not a slam dunk on Fordo. Fordo is, and the mission area for Fordo is deeper than even that bomb. But there are many different ways to skin the cat with the Fordo facility. You can make the mission area not usable when you're working on things like air holes, the life support, the entrances, and then a steady diet of these Moabs eventually kills the facility. I think where I'm concerned right now is we've always centered on the organic ability to build a bomb, where my concern is, well, what did they purchase on the black market smuggling-wise, and do they already have a few weapons that they would now like to use, because it's very obvious they're going to lose this war? So are they in a corner, and are we going to see a North Korean or a Pakistan nuke in the equation here? And I think that we can't limit the proliferation of stuff like that to just the Middle East. We have to be very concerned about the United States as well.
Right. Wait, North Korea, Pakistan, you mentioned, they already have the bomb, right?
Yeah, so they might have shoveled a couple out the back door to the Iranians that they held on to for an insurance policy in case they were going to lose the big war. Well, guess what? They're losing the big war.
Oh, boy. I never thought of it that way.
Greg Kelly, who we are going to hear more from in a few minutes with retired General Blaine Holt and former CIA analyst, former National Security Council Secretary Fred Fleitz. The Minister of Israeli Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, spoke with Greta Van Susteren.
Ambassador, not to make your argument for you, but Israel's being condemned by Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Oman, Qatar, Pakistan, Turkey, Lebanon, Venezuela, Cuba, Russia, China, Algeria, Malaysia, Yemen, Indonesia, and I could go on and on. But not one of those countries wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Not one of them. Most of them have signed the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So,
I don't know about Venezuela.
What do you say to these
Venezuela, I think you said Venezuela. They may actually want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. But what I can tell you is the Arab countries in the region, they will issue their condemnations and they might go on your television show and be very critical of what Israel's doing. But believe me, they're rejoicing over this because Iran is not just a threat to Israel. It's a threat to them. Iran, before October 7th, Iran was in control of 4 Arab capitals in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Yemen. And what Israel has done in the wake of that horrific attack on October 7th is really turn the tides on Iran and its whole axis. You saw what we did to Hamas. You see what we've done to Hezbollah in Lebanon, which actually gives that country and Lebanon a different future. It led to the collapse of Assad in Syria. And right now we're taking on Iran itself, which, Iran is a country, your viewers may not know this, it's 10 times the population of Israel. We're about 10 million. Iran is 100 million. And it's about 80 times the territory. So if you put up a map, you can see the vast difference in size between Israel and Iran. And it's like a little Israeli David is taking on this Iranian Goliath. Well, David had a slingshot and was very precise. We don't have that. But we do have precision weapons. And I think, frankly, no offense to the American Air Force, but I think Israel has the best pilots in the world. And I think we also have tremendous intelligence. And you bring those two things together, and we were able to do shock and awe again in the wee morning hours of Friday. And I think it's started the war under the best possible conditions we have. This shouldn't be something that's a long war. It should be very short. We have clear goals, which is we want to remove 2 existential threats. One is Iran's military nuclear capability. The other is its ballistic missile capability. And you've seen evidence of how damaging those ballistic missiles can be when they can take out whole neighborhoods in Israel. And for a country Israel's size, to have a country like Iran that is trying to produce 300 of these things a month, 10,000 in 3 years, 20,000 in 6 years. We got to take action to remove that threat from over our heads. But what we're doing is not only critical for Israel, it's critical for all of our Arab neighbors. And ultimately, Greta, your viewers are interested in one thing. How does this affect the United States? Iran is a great enemy of America. They're leading people in chance, not just of death to Israel, but death to America. We're the little Satan, and America is the great Satan. And you look at the history. Yeah.
Prime Minister Netanyahu recently said that President Trump was the target or was of an assassination plot by Iran. So he has said that.
Israel is the little Satan and America is the great Satan. Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, on the record with Greta Van Susteren. That's at 6 p.m. Eastern. Back in November, the Department of Justice announced charges against an Iranian man in a murder-for-hire plot to kill Trump before he even became president. That man is still on the loose in Iran. And don't forget, Trump is responsible for the death of Iranian General Soleimani, right, who was killed in the U.S. drone strike ordered by Trump during his first term, and a killing that Trump continues to brag about. So, they still want revenge for that on top of the decades and decades of hate that they have for America. Yesterday was the 10-year anniversary to the day that Donald and Melania Trump came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower in New York City, and he announced that he was running for president. Wake Up America co-host Marc, who worked in Donald Trump's first administration, spoke about it with Donald Trump Jr.
Could you have imagined this 10 years? I mean, so we're on a historic day today. 10 years ago, your dad came down the golden escalator here just a few floors below us, and he's changed the fundamental face, I would say, of not just this country, but the world.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you had an outsider, coming in, and he was, how many times has he been written off? You've seen this. You've seen this for a long time. I mean, he can't. 10 years ago today, he had 0% chance of winning a Republican primary. Zero. All of a sudden that changed. Then he had 0% chance of beating Hillary Clinton. Then he came back and did that. Then he had, we had, after the contrived nonsense of January 20, he has 0% chance of coming back. He's gone and written off. I mean, he's the most written off guy in the history of probably politics, not just American politics, that always finds a way to come back.
One of the most remarkable things I've said is that elevator ride, while yes, it launched a political movement, it launched a political career, it's also undermined, and I think historically later will be viewed as really the destruction of the Democrat Party. They used to run on ideas, may not have agreed with them, but they had ideas. For the last 10 years, because of your father's escalator ride, they've just run on one thing, anti-Trump.
Correct. We now have a team that is sort of battle tested. They had 4 years of hell. We know who the guys that are the real warriors. So it's the first time we actually have a real bench, of viable candidates who are fighters, who fight for the America First movement. So yeah, I think that was perhaps the death knell to the Democrat Party. But I think honestly it was probably pretty similar to what was then the traditional neocon Republican establishment.
One of the things I always it gets compared to the Reagan Revolution, and it's the second coming of such thing. But after 12 years, Reagan Democrats went back, and it's now Trump country, but they went back to being Democrats. Moving forward, how do you make sure that they stay with the America First movement, even when the name Donald J. Trump Sr. may not be on the ballot?
Reagan was incredible, but the predecessors on the Republican side, were not. These were sort of lackluster people, not particularly bright, not particularly, convicted. They didn't have a lot of conviction or resolve, and they sort of just went back and fell into those old ways. And so I think, again, the last 4 years, it took 4 years of hell for us to understand just how fragile our democracy is, just how fragile our economy is, just how quickly things can go away, right? We went from a time of peace to a time of war. We went from a time of prosperity to a time of poverty, and it happened in an instant under Joe Biden.
Yeah, it used to be where it didn't really matter. You just moved the needle one side or a little.
Exactly.
Now it's much more pronounced, and Joe Biden showed us that election results do matter.
Yeah, they matter. They matter bigly.
Bigly.
Someone would say.
Yep, absolutely. All right, sir.
Marc Lotter with Don Jr., and I said that we would be hearing from Greg Kelly again. Greg was also there at Trump Tower that day, working as a local New York City TV anchor, and reminisced with Carl Higbie.
Spoiler alert, they were all wrong. We were right. He did win. And all the things the left said that he was going to do, and he was going to crash the economy and everything like that, he did the opposite. Host of Greg Kelly Reports right here at 9 p.m. Greg, you were one of the OGs.
Well, I was actually in the room when he came down the escalator, Carl, and it's not that I'm a political prophet, but like you, I've spent a lot of time living around the country. I didn't grow up in the media. I spent my 20s, my late teens and 20s in the military, and I just kind of had a better appreciation for how the country thinks and would react to a speech like that. Not growing up in the media culture was hugely beneficial, advantageous, because while they were saying all those things, I said something totally different right after the big speech, and I think we just might have it hanging around somewhere.
We do.
I have it on audio, right? This is proof of something.
Roll it, guys.
Nobody will be pushing us around.
I think he might be a game changer in this race.
Nobody would be tougher on ISIS than Donald Trump. Nobody.
Listen to that speech. It's going to go over well in certain precincts in Iowa, New Hampshire. This is a big deal. This is not a joke.
Look, I didn't say he could win. Number one, I'm there, right? Which is cool. In fact, I saw years later an overhead picture, and you can make out my hairline in the New York Times. That's me right there, standing next to Rosanna Scotto, who is friendly with Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen invited us to go. Right. And I felt the earth move. I really did. I felt like something very seismic had happened. And I did think he could go all the way. I will say, and I actually met with the president right after that event upstairs. There were very few journalists there. It was Bill O'Reilly, George Stephanopoulos, and me, and a crew from Access Hollywood. Lots of cameras, but the journalists didn't even bother to go.
Right.
And I'm so glad I was there.
They thought it was a stunt.
Well, they thought it was a stunt. Look, I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be reality TV show season 92 or $1 billion this or that. But I knew that message when he said, America just doesn't win anymore.
Yeah.
And it just spoke right to me because we hadn't been to the moon in a very long time, and we didn't even have the space shuttle at that point. We couldn't go into outer space.
Yeah. Well, I actually did call it as well, real quick. If we have that clip early on, I was there before he declared, saying, I think he's going to win. Roll this.
What I respect about Donald Trump and why I think he has the strength to be the next commander-in-chief is because he's standing by his statements. He's standing by the conviction, the moral courage and conviction that he has. And I think he'll fight the war on ISIS. I think he'll fix the economy. I would be very comfortable with Donald Trump. You know why? Because he's going to get the lawyers off the battlefield. He's going to fight a war to win. He is a guy who's goal and mission-oriented, and that's why I want him as my commander-in-chief.
That was in... excuse me, Carl. Hello. You want to say anything about that clip?
So actually, that was after he was already...
that was after the South Carolina primary, for crying out loud.
But, I mean, I was there when he came down early on. And, it was such a... Everybody who called me crazy, everybody called you crazy. It was awesome.
Well, look, I must say, after the McCain moment, I thought, well, that's it. He can't win. Because people mocked me for that.
Yeah.
You know, what do these idiots from local news know? But... when he said that the Iraq war was a big fat mistake, that's when he won me over. That's when this is the guy. This is the guy.
From a guy who fought in Iraq, I agree too. We got to leave it right there.
Greg Kelly on Frontline with Carl Higbie yesterday. On one hand, it feels like it was just a couple of years ago, right? And on the other hand, it feels like a long time ago, right? 10 years. It's either 10 long years or 10 quick years. All right, let's close it out with Rob Schmitt revisiting the horrific events that took place this weekend in Minnesota.
On Saturday, 57-year-old Vance Belter, very early Saturday morning, decided to strike on a kill list that he had assembled over an unknown period of time. He started with 2 Democrats in his home state of Minnesota, beginning with State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, whom he shot multiple times. Somehow, the Hoffmans have survived this so far. The next victims would not. Belter assassinated Minnesota State Rep Melissa Hortman and murdered her husband as well. It is a tragedy. It's a terrible story. Despite cops being at the scene, Belter managed to escape from that second murder scene. He was finally arrested last night near his home. There's the picture of that moment. As of tonight, we don't know an official motive. It's a very strange story when you really get into the details, and we'll hear in a second. Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz says nothing more than it was political.
We're here today because an unspeakable tragedy has unfolded in Minnesota. My good friend and colleague, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband, Marc, were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination.
So that's a rather measured and pretty cautious response from Tim Walz, very political guy, as we know, never misses a chance to vilify the right. Nothing about the threat of white supremacist MAGA Republicans, nothing like that at all, which is expected considering Democrats were targeted. You dig a little deeper and find out Belter had no Kings protest flyers in the back of his car. Kind of weird. That he was personally appointed by Tim Walz, the Democrat governor, to the governor's Workforce Development Board. Belter was also part of the organization Minnesota Africans United, a coalition to help all African immigrants improve their lives in Minnesota, which has a huge Somali influence. Think Ilhan Omar. Also, the only politician that he managed to kill, the second on his list, had been in the news just days before she was shot and killed. She made headlines because she had just voted with Republicans to end state-provided health care for illegal immigrants, which is a faction that Belter clearly cares about, as we just said. She had just made headlines for this 1 week ago, and later last week, she was emotional after the concession.
I know that people will be hurt by that vote, and we worked very hard to try to get a budget deal that wouldn't include that provision.
That's somebody that a MAGA guy wants to kill? Strange timing for that assassination, right? Just 4 days later, she would be targeted in what the governor calls an assassination while refusing to elaborate on the politics of it. It's been a couple days now. And as we wait to hear why this happened, Democrats are very desperate to paint the alleged killer as MAGA, of course. The media has been all over this man who says that he is Vance Belter's roommate.
He's very conservative politically, but, we all say he has practice. Well, I don't know if we have the same views anymore, but I thought we did. I was a Trump supporter. Voted for Trump. You like Trump? I like Trump. Nobody's happy with the government. Everybody's happy at this, not happy what this politician does or that politician.
Like I said, it's a weird story. Belter has a wife and kids, still married, but lived with that guy. It's a really weird story. Democrat hit list, no Kings flyers, strange living arrangement for a married man, works with an African foundation. The truth is, we just don't know. It's strange. But one thing we do know is that the Democrat brand cannot handle being attached to any more acts of political violence. That we're certain of. And they are terrified of yet another toxic story. There have been so many.
That is Rob Schmitt, who does a fantastic job of laying out the facts and the timeline of the events there. Yesterday, most mainstream media feasted on that clip of the supposed roommate saying that he liked Trump and he voted for Trump as they went on to blame it on Trump.
Democrats have created a monster that is scaring the hell out of moderate voters, going to make it very hard for them to stay in power. And now we have another lunatic killer. And we don't know what the motivation is. It's a strange story. But before the bodies are even cold, one thing we do know is that they are screaming that this is anything but themselves for survival.
I feel like Trump has really popped the lid off the rhetoric and the sense of hate and violence and promoted this type of an environment.
President Trump, he survived 2 assassination attempts, but his rhetoric and the degree to which he has demonized his critics.
President Trump is the biggest problem here. I mean, he has used hateful, degrading rhetoric from the day he decided to run for president.
I think the first thing we need to do is have our leaders take the temperature down. We're not expecting to see that from President Trump. Unfortunately, he has more than anyone given the permission structure for this reality.
It's got to be anything but them. That's all we know. Bottom line, when you look at all of this, there is a chance that Vance Belter is a deranged Republican voter. There's a chance. We don't really know. There's a lot of evidence that he wasn't. But what's more interesting is just how terrified Democrats are that he might be another of theirs.
Rob Schmitt, host of Rob Schmitt Tonight. Catch it at 7 p.m. Eastern. Honestly, I could care less if the killer is a Democrat or a Republican. He is a deranged psycho, as Rob said, a piece of crap. It's not going to make a difference to Sophie and Colin, the children of Melissa Hortman and her husband Marc, or Melissa's parents, or Marc's parents, or their brothers and sisters and friends, or to the Hoffmans, who will have to live the rest of their life with the physical and mental scars of being shot, nearly killed in their own home. It was immediately political because they were and are politicians, right? That makes sense. But it took less than 24 hours for the media and politicians to start politicizing the suspect. And I am so sick of it. And it's on both sides. Both sides are guilty of it. Maybe not yet in this case, but history shows. And you see what happened yesterday with Mike Lee, right? And the tweets. Totally unnecessary. This is Senator Dick Durbin on the floor yesterday.
To attempt to politicize this tragedy is absolutely unacceptable. This rhetoric from elected officials is beyond dangerous and incites even more violence. It is reprehensible, and it must be called out on both sides of the aisle.
Yes, old Dickie Durbin has said some things himself and probably is guilty of tweeting some things that he shouldn't have tweeted over the course of time, but In this case, he's right. By the way, there wasn't much coverage of this, but a Michigan man was arrested last week for threatening to assassinate President Trump and Vice President Vance in a social media post, saying that if either of them returned to his city, they would be leaving in a body bag. He also said, "I'll kill the effer." James Donald Vance Jr., oddly enough, is his name, also known as J.D. Vance, was charged with 1 count of threatening to kill or injure the president and vice president of the United States and 2 counts of sending an interstate threatening communication. And former New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez is set to report to prison today. Probably already has by the time you heard this. The beginning of an 11-year sentence for accepting bribes and acting as an agent of another country. All right, on Wall Street, stock markets opening in the red this morning, growing concerns over the Middle East after posting solid gains on Monday. Yesterday morning, they said investors were buying the dip and weren't too concerned about Israel and Iran. And then by the end of the day, they said, investors are concerned about what's going to happen between Israel and Iran, and the markets are sinking. Bitcoin and most other major cryptocurrencies also lowered this morning at the time of recording. Right now, Bitcoin is off about $3,000 at 105 and change. Tonight, the Florida Panthers could join an elite group of NHL teams by winning back-to-back Stanley Cup championships. Or the Edmonton Oilers, who lost the Stanley Cup to Florida last year, could force a Game 7. If they do force a Game 7, that would be Friday night in Edmonton. By the way, the last team to win back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, 2020 and 2021, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Bolts. And in the NBA, the Oklahoma City Thunder took a 3-2 lead last night over Indiana in the NBA championship. Game 6 is Thursday night in Indianapolis, when OKC could possibly win the whole thing. Be sure to stay informed throughout the day and keep up with all of the breaking news on Newsmax N2 and at Newsmax.com. Also, make sure you have the app on your phone so you can stay informed anywhere, anytime. The news starts each and every day with Wake Up America, followed by National Report, Newsline, American Agenda, The Chris Salcedo Show, Greta Van Susteren, Rob Schmitt, Rob Finnerty, Greg Kelly, The Right Squad, Ed Henry, John Bachman, Wendy Bell, and much, much more. I'm Tony Marino. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Pay attention and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.